In the headlines, an opposition rally in Tehran has reportedly ended after police fired tear gas into the crowd. Around 1,000 protesters had gathered in a central square defying warnings by elite revolutionary guards earlier that they would crush the rallies. The state radio has also confirmed that hundreds of people have been arrested. And health worries for Iran as well after it confirmed its first case of the H1N1 flu. Reports say the patient is a 16-year-old Iranian living in the US. He tested positive when he arrived in Tehran, but is said to be recovering. Elsewhere, the Philippines has recorded its first death related to the H1N1 flu. Authorities say the 49-year-old woman died at her home last week. It's believed she had been suffering from heart and liver ailments as well. You're watching Channel News Asia.
Tonight, Japanese business confidence improves for the first time in 3 quarters. Hong Kong disbands an economic task force set up to assess the impact of the global financial crisis. And Thailand's prime minister says the economy should turn positive by the year's end. Good evening, everyone. I'm Timothy Go. You're now watching Asia Business Tonight, and leading our bulletin tonight, Japanese business confidence has improved for the first time in 3 quarters. This is according to a quarterly corporate sentiment survey jointly conducted by the Ministry of Finance and Cabinet Office.
Big manufacturers in Japan were less pessimistic about the economy in the second quarter compared to the previous 3 months. The large company business sentiment index came in at minus 22.4. A negative number indicates that companies are mostly pessimistic, but the reading is a sharp improvement on the minus 51.3 in the first quarter. It also reinforces the view that the world's second largest economy has touched bottom in the first 3 months of this year. And some analysts say today's numbers suggest that the closely watched Bank of Japan's quarterly survey, or Tankan, could show a sharp improvement when released next week. Still, the data comes as the World Bank warns that prospects for the global economy remain unusually uncertain, despite recent signs of improvement. It's now expecting the Japanese economy to contract by 6.8% this year, worse than the 5.3% decline estimated earlier.
A high-profile economic task force set up in Hong Kong to assess the impact of the global financial crisis has been disbanded, and that's because the economic uncertainties facing the territory seem to have abated, at least for now. The announcement came today after the committee met for the 5th time. The task force was headed by Chief Executive Donald Tsang, and in its last meeting, focused on long-term planning for the Hong Kong economy.
To the outside world, Hong Kong embodies professionalism, integrity, judicial independence, efficiency, a free and clean society, and free flow of information. This brand name, embodying this host of soft power, can be leveraged to draw customers from around the globe.
The committee came up with some new ideas to help Hong Kong fight the slowdown, and these include setting aside new land sites for building private hospitals and educational institutions to grow Hong Kong as an education and healthcare services center. Thailand's recession-hit economy should move growth back into positive territory by year-end and get on a recovery track with a possible 2% growth rate by next year, depending on how the global economy fares. The Thai Prime Minister Apisit Vejjajiwa gave this assessment at a Thomson Reuters dialogue session with business leaders and media during his one-day visit to Singapore. Channel News Asia's Asha Popatlal with this report.
Protests such as these took its toll on the key tourism sector in Thailand, keeping foreign investors away and helping to send the economy into recession. But the Thai Prime Minister remains positive about the core economic strengths of the country.
We are determined to keep our base as a production hub for the auto industries, part of the electronics industry. And also we aim to increase the portion of the service economy in the economy as a whole. So the potential and the strengths are there. the politics has to be reformed, has to be changed to support that.
The Thai leader is hopeful that growth would turn positive by the end of this year. He says the second major stimulus package will allow the government to borrow almost $12 billion that could create up to 2 million jobs. The funds will be used for irrigation and infrastructure projects, but should not put a strain on domestic liquidity.
We will not be drawing liquidity away from the private sector. We are determined to crowd in investment and not crowd out.
On boosting investor confidence, a recurrent theme during this session, the Thai Prime Minister said that his government had no intention of restricting foreign businessmen and that in fact it was working to liberalize the financial sector and do what it can to stimulate the development of capital markets. The Thai Prime Minister is heading to China next, looking at some specific areas of opportunities. These include getting the Chinese to participate in the Thai agricultural sector and invest in infrastructure projects, as well as drawing more Chinese tourists to Thailand. Asha Pepitlau, Channel News Asia, Singapore.
Now, overall, emerging Asian economies may lead the way for global economic recovery, according to the Asian Development Bank. Speaking at a public lecture today, ADB President Harukido Kuroda says Asian governments should take this opportunity to rebalance their sources of growth and forge greater regional trade ties.
The Asian growth story has been primarily export-driven, and this has led to global payment imbalances that have contributed to the current downturn. According to the ADB, this needs to change.
Resolving the global economic crisis means that the unwinding of these imbalances in an orderly manner. Unfortunately, this will likely be a long and downward process. As the US economy deleverages by saving more and spending less, emerging Asian exporters will obviously suffer. It means that for emerging Asia, rebalancing the sources of growth is not an option, but a necessity for sustained high growth.
According to the ADB, Asia needs to boost its domestic and regional demand without turning away from globalization. And it says deeper financial and trade integration may be the solution for strengthening regional demand.
Increased domestic demand for final goods within the region will allow for more substantive intra-regional trade. Consumers will demand more product variety, creating greater potential for intra-industry trade in differentiated products across the region. Consolidating the so-called noodle bowl of the region's free trade agreements into an inclusive free trade area will also accelerate the rebalancing process.
The ADB has forecast growth in developing Asia to slow to 3.4% this year from 6.3% last year due to weak exports. But it also expects growth to accelerate to as much as 6% in 2010.
Let's check in now on today's stock market action, starting with Wall Street. U.S. stocks are drifting lower in early trade this Monday, with sentiment hit by a bearish economic forecast from the World Bank. For a closer look at this, it's over now to Channel News Asia's Nathan King, who is, of course, in New York this morning there. Good morning, Nathan.
Yeah, it's one story, and that's the World Bank saying that the economy is going to decline globally by 2.9% or 1.7%. We're seeing the Dow Jones down around, 1.5%, 140 points. NASDAQ down around 2.5%. The S&P down around 2%. We are seeing commodity shares and major equities falling. The dollar rising a little bit, and treasuries a little bit more interest in there as well. Apple shares, however, are up. They've sold 1 million of their new 3G iPhones over the first weekend of selling them. That is a huge jump there. There's also hope that Steve Jobs may return to the helm sometime soon. Under pressure, shares of Citigroup after an analyst said some bondholders could be forced to sell their stock in the capital reorganization plan from the bank. That could liquidate shareholder value even more. And a big chemist chain here, pharmacy chain, Walgreens, down around 3% after their profits missed expectations. That is due to higher costs. And so those shares are under pressure. Also, the Department of Justice is looking into the big tie-up between Merck and Schering-Plough, a $41 billion deal. That's still expected to go through, but a bit of a hiccup on the biggest merger we've seen of 2009. But hey, Monday morning blues here as stocks are definitely down.
All right, Nathan, thank you very much for that. Let's hop over now to Europe. Stocks are heading lower there as well, led by energy and airline stocks. Channel News Asia's Ole Barrett is in London for all the action this hour. Ollie?
Yeah, very similar story this side of the Atlantic as well. That World Bank forecast hitting all the major European indices. They are all sharply down as we head towards the end of Monday's trading session. As you can see, the CAC is down over 2.5%. The DAX is down well over 2%, as is the FTSE. A bunch of sectors being hit. Mining, metals are down, so we're seeing mining stocks hit all across Europe. Anglo-American, the only one rising, is Xstrata. Its rival says it would be interested in a merger. We're also seeing BP stock down, Shell stock is down, BG down. All these energy companies hit by falling crude prices. Car makers falling as well over in France. Renault and Michelin shares, for example, on the way down. All coming from that World Bank forecast. A very gloomy start to the week here in Europe. Back to you.
Ollie, thank you very much for that. We're going to take a break now here on Asia Business Tonight. Coming up next, action from the Asian bourses. And there are concerns that Japan's newest airport might find it hard to sustain operations. We'll find out why when we return.
Nothing escapes Market Directory, Singapore's one-stop buying guide. Stop searching, start finding. Money matters, and in the current global economic turmoil, the stakes have never been higher. Let MoneyMind be your guide to successful wealth management. Join Melvin Young as he gives you a roundup of the world's financial news, keeps you updated on the markets, the numbers, the trends, and learn smart investment strategies from analysts and experts. Be right on the money with the all-new MoneyMind. Every Sunday at 9:30 p.m. only on Channel News Asia. MoneyMind is brought to you by the WRX STI.
We are back here on Asia Business Tonight, Monday. It's time for a closer look at stock market action across the Asian region. Let's begin with Northeast Asia. Channel News Asia's Roland Lim is joining us now from Hong Kong with that. Roland?
Tim, Northeast Asian markets have started the new trading week on a positive note, but traders say the mood is somewhat cautious after a mixed performance on Wall Street last Friday. The Nikkei edged ahead by 0.4%. Beer maker Sapporo jumping 18% today thanks to a ratings hike by Credit Suisse. Now over in South Korea, gains in tech and bank shares helped push the Kospi 1.2% above water. The TAIEX was boosted by old economy stocks like property, climbing 1.8%. Here in Hong Kong, the Hang Seng Index rose 2.5% and the Shanghai Composite 0.6% higher. Now, sentiment was boosted after China asked its national pensions funds to take over some state-owned shares in listed companies.
Thank you very much, Roland. Now, as for Southeast Asian markets, they also closed mostly in the red today amid caution ahead of a U.S. Fed policy meeting on Wednesday. Of course, Singapore's STI down by 0.3%. Weighed down by lingering concerns over the economic outlook in Singapore. Over in Malaysia, the KLCI fell by 1.3%, hurt there by profit-taking in selected blue chips and late selling in commodity-related stocks helped push the Jakarta Composite 0.8% into the red this Monday. The top Chinese electronics retailer GOM has reached an investment deal with U.S. private equity firm Bain Capital. This will allow it to raise at least $148 million. Under the deal, GOM will issue $233 million worth of convertible bonds to Bain Capital. It will also issue nearly 2.5 billion new shares in an open offer to shareholders, which Bain will underwrite. GOM says trading in its shares will resume tomorrow. The counter has been suspended since last November following news that its founder was being investigated for alleged financial irregularities. Shareholders of China Minsheng Banking Corp have approved plans by the medium-sized Chinese lender to list shares in Hong Kong. This will pave the way for the lender to raise more than $2.9 billion in fresh capital and potentially introduce a foreign strategic investor later this year. Under the deal, China Minsheng plans to issue up to 3.3 billion new shares in an IPO in Hong Kong, and that represents 15% of its enlarged share capital. The bank already has an A-share listing in Shanghai, which is open only to domestic investors. It aims to list its shares in Hong Kong in the fourth quarter of this year. The Japanese government is planning an emergency loan to Japan Airline. According to reports tonight, the state-run Development Bank of Japan is arranging a loan of about $1 billion in cooperation with mega banks Mitsubishi UFJ, Sumitomo Mitsui, and Mizuho. JAL had previously applied to borrow some $2 billion under a government program of low-interest financing for cash-strapped companies. The carrier is expecting a net loss of $655 million for the current fiscal year. Meanwhile, there are concerns that Japan's newest airport might find it hard to sustain operations given the current global downturn. Channel News Asia's Michio Ishida reports.
Japan's newest airport has 5 airlines operating out of it, including the country's 2 largest, JAL and All Nippon Airways. Authorities say operations at the Mount Fuji Shizuoka Airport have been smooth since its opening on June 4th.
スタートはもう搭乗率は 80% から 90% ですので、これはですね、本当に嬉しいことですが、これをやっぱり維持していくことが必要なんだ。ただ、今6月は旅行的には一番悪いシーズン。これから夏休み、そして秋というふうになってきますと、ますますですね、伸びていく時ですから、十分期待できますし。
But in the past months, the unforeseen has also happened.
開港してね、特に東北航空の場合は、インフルエンザの影響とかあるいは欠航を直前に通告されるということで、大変予定が狂ったためにキャンセルが相次いでしょう。そういうのも響いてちょっとお客のね確保でちょっと困難を極めてるんですけど。
Airports around the world make money by charging takeoff and landing fees. So the more flights there are, the more money the airport makes. To sustain its operations, Mount Fuji Shizuoka Airport will need to see at least 1.38 million passengers pass through its doors every year. Critics have cited the airport's location as a setback. It's located between 2 major airports, Haneda in Tokyo, which is the busiest in Japan, and Centrair in Nagoya. But others say Shizuoka's location is an asset and is a big convenience for people in the region.
日本は新幹線文化です。これまでが。やっぱりね、航空文化っていうのはね、あまり育ってないと思います。特に静岡の場合は新幹線に乗って東京と大阪行けばもう用は足りたと。
One survey estimates that 90% of Japan's airports are losing money. Coupled with the economic downturn, the outlook doesn't look too good for Shizuoka.
There are 98 airports currently in Japan. Now, some analysts say it's just too many. The background is this. In 1990, the U.S. is said to have pressured Japan to construct more airports. And today, there are a few supported by the central government, while more than half are maintained by local governments.
And there's another one on the way. Japan's 99th airport is expected to open in Ibaraki next year. Michio Ishida, Channel News Asia, Shizuoka, Japan.
Next year on Asia Business Tonight, the yellow metal starts to glitter again. How far can gold prices go? We'll bring you some answers when we return.
Tuesday on Shubh Love India. Power backup devices market in India is lucrative and fast growing.
The other additional power projects aren't coming along in time gives us an opportunity for many of the power backup players.
And the art of tattoo emerging as a booming business.
Earlier we used to do 20 tattoos a month. Now we do almost 100, 90 to 100 a month. So definitely they're spending.
Watch Shubh Love India Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. only on Channel News Asia.
Celebrity Break every Wednesday, 8 p.m. on Channel U.
The excitement of bringing my son to show him where his grandfather came from. My dad has always remembered his family here, so I must continue so that they know where we come from. When I see my relatives now, and my nephews and my son, the resemblance is there. We cannot run away.
We're back here on Asia Business Tonight. Time for our weekly stock picking segment. We turn a spotlight on two Singapore-listed companies, the land transport operator Comfort Delgro and finance company Hong Leong. Buy, hold, or sell. Let's hear what the analysts are saying in this week's Stock Watch with Channel News Asia's Nicholas Fang.
Now, our guest tonight is Leng Seng Chun, analyst at DMG and Partners Securities. And he joins us from our city studios at OCBC Centre in downtown Singapore. Seng Chun, let's get things rolling with Comfort Delgro. Now, DMG has a buy call on the stock. What exactly do you like about the company?
Comfort Delgro offers an investor the scope to invest in a land transport company with a global presence. And in this respect, we feel that there's a lot of potential because it offers diversification, and at the same time the land transport sector is pretty defensive even in periods of economic recession.
Well, you mentioned diversification and looking at other sort of markets. Comfort Delgro has been striving to grow its footprint in overseas markets, but one of the places it's been having some trouble, it's its UK taxi operations. How big an impact do you think that's going to have on the company's overseas revenues?
Well, putting it in perspective, we have seen the financial sector in the UK being affected, and that has affected Comfort Delgro's taxi operations in London. The overall UK share of Comfort Delgro's revenue is about 27%. So in that sense, we could still see some weakness coming from the UK, but we feel that this will be more than compensated by strength in other areas, particularly in Australia, where they are growing both organically and inorganically.
Okay, great. Could we get your 12-month price target for Comfort Delgro then, please?
We value Comfort Delgro based on some of the parts. We do a discounted cash flow for the Singapore operations, and as well as use a price-earnings ratio for its overseas operations. This gives us a target price of $1.78.
Okay, great. Well, moving on now, I see here that you're actually maintaining your buy call on Hong Leong Finance, citing the improvement in residential property sales for that optimism. Where else do you actually see value in this particular counter?
As developers are able to sell more of their residential units, this would mean that the developers would be guaranteed some form of cash flow over the next 3 years or thereabouts. And in this case, it would mean that the finance companies like Hong Leong Finance, which lend out to developers, would benefit. For example, Hong Leong Finance lends out 30% of its loans to the building and construction sector. So with better cash flow for companies in this sector, it would mean that asset quality for Hong Leong Finance would be better.
Okay, great. Well, Seng Chun, DMG has a 12-month price target of 320 for Hong Leong Finance. That represents another 24% upside from recent closing prices. With the shares having run up about 26% so far this year, don't you feel you're being a little bit too bullish with this call?
Well, I think if we continue to see good residential property sales, let's say over the next 1 to 2 months or over the next quarter, this would mean that the building and construction sector, the companies in this sector would have stronger balance sheet and cash flow. And I think if that is the case, we could still see a good upside for Hong Leong Finance.
Seng Chun, thank you so much for your time. It's always good talking to you. I've been speaking there with Ling Seng Chun from DMG and Partner Securities.
Gold is starting to glitter again with investors as other traditional investments suffer amid the global recession. And as they search for safe havens for their money, industry experts are predicting gold prices will surge above the $1,000 mark this year. Channel News Asia's Leslie Tang with this report.
It appears gold is gaining back much of its shine amid the uncertainty of the global recession. Gold resources and mining company G Resources is upbeat about the precious metals investment potential. It says investors are returning to gold as it serves as an effective hedge against both inflation and deflation. The weakening U.S. dollar has also boosted its appeal.
Absolute perfect metal being both a commodity and a great store of value for an individual, a great store of value for a company, great store of value for a country. But it's also a currency. It's a medium. It's a very strong store of value, but also a strong consumer product.
Historically, when the economy is down, the performance of gold goes up. Experts also expect gold prices to test record highs in the near future. Spot gold prices rose to as high as $992.90 in February. Last year, it hit an all-time high of $1,003.20 in March. Industry experts believe it could return to and even surpass the $1,000 mark this year.
Strong demand, subdued supply, financial uncertainty, inflation all add up to a very strong environment for gold.
G Resources predicts it could trade up to $1,500 per ounce in the next 2 or 3 years. Apart from the investment front, the demand for the yellow metal has been boosted by jewelry demand from emerging economies such as India and China. Meanwhile, the World Gold Council said gold purchases rose 38% during the first quarter of this year alone. It was the first time the figure exceeded usage by jewelers in 5 years. Leslie Tang, Channel News Asia, Hong Kong.
And that's all we have on Asia Business Tonight for this Monday. I'm Timothy Go. Have a good night.
The rest of the world sleeps, Asia rises.
Good morning, a warm welcome to Primetime Morning. I'm Stephen Chen.
Serving up your daily dose of news, business and entertainment. Primetime Morning, weekdays from 6:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. on Channel News Asia.
The common abdominal and colorectal conditions faced by most Singaporeans are stomach ulcers, acid reflux problem, bleeding from piles or even cancer, and maybe blockage of the bowel. To most people, surgery is very scary, and to them it means a prolonged recovery, a painful recovery, and unsightly scars. Now, over the last 10 to 20 years, there have been significant advances in the field of surgery.
Join 4 specialists as they share state-of-the-art treatment methods for common digestive diseases. Serious Belly Matters, a clinical seminar on abdominal and colonic health, happening Saturday, 4th July at the Suntec Convention Centre Theatre. Book your tickets now to enjoy special rates. For more details, log on to channelnewsasia.com/seminar. Brought to you by Raffles Hospital.